Welcome to the Task-Based Flight Test Series. Please welcome your host from Cleared Direct, a real carnivore, Steve Cox.
Thanks, Joe. It's Steve. Welcome back to Cleared Direct and the Task-Based Flight Test program. This is episode 2, where we take our first flight, our maiden voyage in our home-built aircraft. We're also going to do a taxi test and break wear in. For the flow, we're going to talk about the pinned comment from last episode. Thanks, everybody, for your comments. And then there was another comment that led me to think that it's probably worth doing a quick clarification. So I'll clarify something from the last episode. And then I'm going to brief up the flight test via the flight test card. And you guys, if you want to see my entire actual flight briefing with my crew, I'm going to go ahead and link the long form maiden flight of the bogey video right here. I really recommend, after you watch this video, I'll link it at the very end so you can just click on it as well, that you go ahead and watch that, listen to my full brief. Okay, and then, because during the execution portion of this video, I'm going to play kind of that in the background while I discuss other considerations that I want you to think about before leading into the first flight. And then, guys, that's going to be it. The debrief is going to be in that long form maiden flight video. So I'm not going to debrief this because I've already done it. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the pinned comment from episode 1. Richard Turner, 6278. Thank you for your comment. You are the pinned comment. Longtime follower here. Something you might mention or discuss sometime is the added safety factor overall of building your own aircraft. I can't overstate this enough. It's an advantage to know and understand every system of the aircraft you are flying. Thank you for your comment. I started reading that and I'm like, wait, more safe? How is this more safe? I'm a first-time home builder. This is high risk all the time. But he's absolutely right. Boil it down, I was the most meticulous I could be in the build, but more so is there's no other airplane I've ever flown that I was more intimate with the knowledge of how the plane was put together. Pretty obvious, right? But it actually has a direct contribution to safety. You know, imagine yourself up there, something strange goes on, you kind of almost immediately know what's going on with that plane. So, because you built it. Richard, thank you. The other comment that I want to talk about that's going to spur a clarification here is, I won't read it, but essentially he's saying that, hey, you can't exactly throw out your ops limits, like I said in episode 1, after phase 1 is done and have it be replaced by your POH. He's absolutely right. I totally oversimplified that and I apologize, but the ops limitations are essentially the same thing as your Special Airworthiness Certificate. I actually drove out to the hangar today. I needed to start the bogey and the Bonanza anyway, so I did that. I was missing them too, but I did pull this out of the actual airplane to go through it, and we'll go through a little bit about kind of what it is, but it's your Special Airworthiness Certificate. As I mentioned, there are conditions and limitations that are kind of for all airplanes. But then it gets into actual phase 1 operation limitations on page 2 for me specifically. They're probably going to vary for some people. And then on page 3, it ends the phase 1 and it says the following limitations apply during phase 2 operations, and you will maintain this on the aircraft. And there's going to be times potentially when you're going back and forth between phase 1 and phase 2, you're doing modifications. So what is in the phase 2 operations section, you ask? There's 5 things. The first 3 are the type of conditions you can fly in. Day VFR flight is obviously authorized. Night flight is authorized, you know, with the caveats. You got to be in accordance with 91-205 Charlie. And then IFR, as long as it's in accordance with 91-205 Delta, then I am approved to fly IFR. One thing I don't have done yet is my IFR pedostatic certification, transponder, all that. So I need to get that done before I touch any sort of moisture, so to say. And then the last 2 paragraphs are the pilot in command must not perform any maneuvers that have not been flight tested or operate the aircraft outside the weight, airspeeds, and center of gravity limits tested. Okay, if you want to make a modification, going back into phase 1. And the last thing is, this one has changed over time. It used to be the first part of this, which was flight over a densely populated area or in a congested airway is authorized for the purpose of takeoff or landing only. It doesn't say only anymore. There's a semicolon. It says, or unless sufficient altitude is maintained to make a safe emergency landing in the event of a power unit failure without hazard to person's property on the ground. So that's great that they updated that. It's a lot more clear. Yes, you can fly over densely populated areas, just not that if you lose your engine, you're going to be a risk. Cool. So thank you guys. Thanks, Mark. And also the pinned comment, Richard Turner. Thank you so much for everybody's comments. I'm looking forward to going through them in this video. And a reminder, I'll pin one and we'll talk about it in next video. Guys, here's my flight test card for the maiden voyage. Again, I'm going to kind of blast through this fairly quick. I might add a little bit of texture on some of this, but it's going to generate some questions I want you thinking, and then we'll get into some of the more meat and potatoes of it when I run the video in the background. So just the basic demographics up top, maiden test flight. I've got my mission objective. I'll let you kind of read that. And then the risk is absolutely high today. Major test points are brake wear-in, engine break-in, and high and mid-speed controllability. Weather, for me personally, I wanted at least 2,500 foot ceiling, less than 5 knots of crosswind, and less than a 10 knots gust factor. Fuel on board is 28 gallons today. The memory items are my glide speed, 59 knots, and engine restart procedures. CG today is 35 inches, which equates to 32% aft in the envelope. Good and safe. Documents, as a reminder to me, in the bogey, I've got my registration, my airworthiness certificate, including the ops limits, and then the weight and balance is in my EFIS. And then on my person, make sure that I have my pilot's license and medical. Threats, the unknown, right? Pretty much everything today. Cylinder head temperatures, traffic, as we're flying around as a formation and a new airplane, and of course, tail wheel, since I am so inexperienced at tail wheel flying and unrecent as well. All right, frequencies for the bend. CTAF is 124.0. Bogey test frequency is 122.75. That is a good generic test frequency. Feel free to use. And then if there's somebody on that frequency, we can chatter mark. That's Air Force or military speak for, hey, go to a backup frequency, which is fingers. Base airspeed today, I'm going to reference everything in as this, or if I forget to call out an airspeed while formation flying or during a rejoin, he can assume that I'm going to be at 120 knots. Okay, this is a poor choice, and we'll get to it when you guys watch the video. All right, for all these test points here, I want to point out that these are very, very basic, and that is by design. I want to offload a lot of my brain cycles, my computational power, limited as always. I want to offload it and shed it because it's going to be maxed out. And so I want this as my whoopee. I want to be able to go, okay, where am I? That's what I just did. Okay, that's the next step. Very, very basic. And that's one of the challenges, is to adhere to it and stick to it. Starting off, I wanted to ensure that my SD card is in the G3X to record the flight data recorder, the telemetry. And then a reminder for my GoPro Insta360 audio recording. It's not just for the video, not just for my YouTube channel. This is for test. For personal protective equipment, helmet, Nomex, and then the ground crew briefed, in position, comms established. Engine start, I want to remind myself to turn on my nav lights and beacon. Nav lights only because it's daytime. I don't need my nav lights, but the beacon's on that circuit. And then number 4, brake wear-in. All right, so we're going to accelerate to 35 knots on the runway, ground speed, and apply firm brake pressure to 5 knots. Repeat 2 more times. We're going to do our engine run-up check and ensure the exterior lights are on. Pitch trim, reminder to put in neutral. Because again, I don't have the checklists. This is my checklist. I don't have a POH yet. Takeoff, oil temperature greater than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's going to be a no flap takeoff, full rich, raise the tail wheel only if comfortable. Otherwise, just let the airplane fly off the ground. For the RPM, since this is my first time flying a fixed pitch prop or a ground adjustable prop in a really long time, it gets very basic for me. So I want to establish the highest RPM, full throttle, as long as it doesn't exceed 2,600 RPM, because as soon as I start rolling down the runway, that RPM is going to start increasing. My red line is 2,700 RPM. And so there's a reminder here to adjust the throttle as necessary. I'm going to rotate if I'm not already rotated or not already airborne by 60 knots. I'm going to go ahead and rotate well above my planned stall speed or listed stall speed in the manual. And then another reminder to, as the airspeed accelerates, to just keep red line in mind. That's going to be a big factor. Spoiler alert. Okay, then we're going to establish 100 knots if we can. Climb to 5,500 feet. MSL, remain above the airfield. Max 30 degrees angle of bank. So that's 1,500 feet, actually almost 2,000 feet above the airfield. So monitor the CHTs. Ensure they're below red line. And if unable, pitch for more airspeed and reduce the throttle. And then once we're stabilized and level, we're going to establish the max RPM not to exceed 2,700 RPM and then 150 degree reach of peak. I wish I didn't put that in there. I didn't want to reference that. You just maintain full reach. Don't even worry about it on the first flight. But 1,300 is kind of nice to have in there because if it's anything much greater than 1,300, I'm going to be concerned that maybe I'm too lean and probably going to have to abort. A note to myself to note the percentage horsepower. If we're less than 75%, I want to descend as practical to maintain max percent horsepower. If I'm comfortable, head over to the east to descend for increased horsepower. For the flight controls, I want to note both the stick position as well as look outside and look at the flight control position as it is and ensure that there's no flutter, feel the stick, and just kind of monitor that the entire flight. And we're going to continue the engine break-in for 1 hour, just clearing our flight path and doing continuous ops checks. I'll define what an ops check here is in a second. If all is nominal, we're going to change leads for PR shots, check the cameras, stop them if I need to, take a selfie. It's kind of just a reminder to enjoy myself, take a picture, and you definitely want to remember this because not like you won't until the day you die, but you want to share it. At that point, I'm going to have the chase aircraft do a BD check. That's Air Force 4 battle damage check. We're going to check for leaking fluids, loose panels, flight control deflection that's non-standard, any sort of flutter, and then a shiny belly. He's going to sing up if he sees any of that stuff. Once we hit Joker fuel or Joker time, which is either 1 hour airborne or wing tanks are empty, and Joker equates to, so bingo fuel, you're probably familiar with that term. That's you're done with the mission based upon a fuel state, time to go back home. Joker is a fuel state or a time that it's time to finish up that portion of the mission and move on to subsequent portions of the mission. So that's all that means. And we're going to climb to the highest reasonable altitude above the airfield and accomplish a controllability check. We're going to reduce power slowly in level flight to slowly bring the CHTs to mid 350 if able. That's so we're not shock cooling the engine. We're going to gently decelerate to no slower than noted safe flying airspeed at the takeoff if unknown 65 knots. Remember that airspeed. If half scale deflection of any flight control is required to maintain stable flight, unaccelerated level flight, I'm going to note that airspeed and terminate the controllability check and accelerate. We're going to note flight control forces, any sort of deflection, and amount of pitch trim remaining. Okay, once bingo happens, so post controllability check or if the wing tanks are empty, we're going to slowly descend to pattern altitude for the landing. And then for the pattern, I want to fly a tight 1 to a full stop, maintaining minimum airspeed flown in the controllability check. If it was insignificant, then 65 knots is going to be my approach speed. No flaps, not touching the flaps all day today. For the landing, we're going to maintain ref airspeed 65 knots or whatever it was in that controllability check, and we're going to fly to the numbers, establish about 10 feet over the numbers, slowly bringing the power to idle and decelerating and bringing it down into ground effect and touching down. But when you're doing that slowly, you're eating up a lot of runway. So especially with a much faster airspeed than is probably going to be your eventual approach speed. So you're going to be chewing up runway. So establish a latest touchdown point. Today I figured 3,000 feet. I'm going to attempt a wheel landing to fly the bogey to the touchdown and keep the tail wheel off. Mainly because I've only done one high-speed test and really didn't get over about 35 knots. So I didn't want the tail wheel doing anything squirrely if I landed too hot. So if I'm comfortable, I'll do a wheel landing, keep that tail wheel off. But if the tail wheel hits or touches, no big deal. Gently apply the brakes in accordance with the runway remaining. We're going to maintain directional control with rudder, and this is basic, just reminding me basic tail wheel stuff. You've got rudder, you've got tail wheels, you've got brakes, you've also got crosswind control because aileron is a very, very important input, especially on a tailwheel aircraft when there's any sort of crosswind. Remind myself to have an expeditious taxi back. We're in the break-in phase. We're not in the phase where we want to be idling this engine for too long. We want to note the RPM rise at shutdown, doing a standard idle mixture to cut off shutdown. We want to see a 30 to 50 RPM rise for ideal mixture. I pointed out idle cutoff, no duh, right? Well, I do want to do other tests where I shut off the engine via the fuel flow valve. I also want to shut it off via the ignition. So that's why I emphasize that. Okay, moving on. Devices, turn off and collect my audio, my GoPro, Insta360, and the G3X SD card. Post-flight inspection, very thorough. I can accomplish later. Champagne drink. And then a reminder that I had a medical appointment at 15:10 local. All right, constantly during the flight, we want to be doing ops checks. What are those? We're scanning engine instruments, we're checking the fuel, and then we're verifying that our flight path and traffic are clear. We're going to visually clear as well as ensure ADS-B screen visible. We're going to call out traffic to each other inter-flight. Here are my other participants. Thank you again to my crew. Guys, that was the flight test card. Now we're going to get into the actual execution, where I'm just going to run the video and talk about some more considerations that I primarily got out of the advisory circular and the EAA flight test manual right here. So I'm pulling some notes out of them. Guys, enjoy this day. It can be stressful. It's going to be stressful. It should be a little bit stressful, but that whole stress with versus performance, you're going to be right at the top of that thing. If it's too much stress, scrub, do it a different day, but try to remember to enjoy yourself. The other thing is to remember, aviate, navigate, communicate. Man, you are a test pilot today, so aviate. Don't lose sight of it. This is your first flight in your aircraft. And also don't hesitate to get priority by using that E word, okay? If you haven't said it before, emergency, be comfortable with saying it, okay? If anything goes wrong, declare that emergency, land, you're a test flight, FAA understands, and we're not gonna fool around with waiting to get on the ground. If somebody is in our way, we're gonna ask them politely to move, declare the emergency, and get on the ground safely. But before any of that happens, we're gonna do our homework. We're going to get current in a similar make and model if you can. We're going to reach out to friends on forums and get anecdotes and lessons learned and best practices for your type of aircraft. You're going to chair fly the heck out of that mission, sitting in your airplane with your avionics on, okay? This bit me. When you watch the video, you're going to know why. I spent so much time on my avionics, wiring it up, configuring the back end. I spent so little time on the front end, the HVI, the human vehicle interface, or the GUI, the graphical user interface. I did not know how to turn up or down my number 2 remote radio. It's obvious now. It seems obvious, but when you are not at 0 knots and 1G flying around with your hair on fire, you're not thinking straight. So get familiarized with the interactions between screens and pages. I had never flown a Garmin G3X Touch. It was awesome, but takes some getting used to. I mentioned this before, but your flight test card is your checklist. Use your checklist, not only in the flight, but also add some things for a pre-flight checklist. You haven't built your POH, you don't necessarily have one at this point. Take the time to actually do it, because again, we want to offload those brain bites, and you want to just follow a thing. Yes, my bolts are tight, my this and that. So follow a checklist so you don't have to think about it. Compute your weight and balance. That sounds so obvious. We spent a lot of time in last episode talking about weight and balance. Didn't we do it? Well, we did the baseline. But what about today? I had 28 gallons on board, just me, my helmet, my phone, like all those things need to be considered in these weight and balances, and do it for that actual flight. And ballast very carefully. If you're going to be using lead shot to adjust your CG, then make sure that it cannot come open. Strap things down. If you go negative G's, you do not want them flying up and hitting you. So PPE, the helmet I used, I'm going to be doing backcountry flying and stole drag competition, so I was required to have it for those things. So I thought, yeah, obviously I'm going to wear it on day one. Would I wear a helmet if I didn't own one? Yeah, I'd go out and borrow one. I just think the risk is there. Why not wear a helmet? And I had Nomex, of course. I would recommend it if you can find some. Wear Nomex gloves as well if you can. Just realize that those touchscreens can be a little bit difficult, so you see my fingers are cut off of my gloves. You guys, parachute, I never really even considered it. It just was not an option to me. It would change the seat position. I don't know how to egress safely. I'm just not trained in it other than an ejection seat, so didn't consider it. If I'm forgetting something, or if you guys have reasons why I should have considered it, please put them in the comments, of course. So I will spend a little bit more time on chase aircraft. Ask yourself if the chase aircraft will truly, really contribute to the safety of the flight. I would submit most of the time it would not. Okay. The reason why I did it was Stitch is one of my best friends. He's a brother in arms. We've flown F-15s together for many, many years. We know what each other is thinking. And so while we briefed and we talked over the radio for some stuff, there's a lot that was unsaid. And so if you don't have anybody like that has a similar level of high level of formation training, I'd be hard pressed to see that it's really worth it on the first flight of a reputable kit. If it's your first flight of brand new design, then I'd probably think about having a chase ship. So think about that and be honest with yourself. I did give Stitch a copy of Section 2 of the Advisory Circular 9089 Charlie, entitled The Role of a Chase Plane. Okay, hand it to them, talk it over. Don't let that replace a good brief and good contracts and understanding. There's a paragraph in the flight test manual about self-control. I'm not going to belittle you. I just will say that, hey, if things are going really well, you're going to be tempted to maybe do some stalls. If you didn't plan on doing stalls, don't do stalls, okay? Stick to your guns. Don't go shining your ass and go and do low approaches, and that's all I'll say. The weather I decided on kind of arbitrarily. I just wanted a good few thousand feet above me, of course. And then the crosswinds limitations I put on myself were because I was so not current and not experienced in tailwheel aircraft. So those were probably a bit excessive for most people, but that's what I was willing to accept that day and stick to it. You guys, I found myself on the day of going, I haven't checked my tire pressure in a long time or my brake fluids in a long time. So double check those things. Easy to forget. That brings me into the taxi and brake tests. Prior to the maiden voyage day, I would recommend doing a slow speed taxi, maybe even mid-speed taxi. You don't want to spend a ton of time with that engine running, so make it quick. Just to correct anything, because anything is going to be amplified the higher speed you are, obviously. So get that fixed on a day where you're not worried about doing the first flight. High-speed taxi test, yeah, I did a day of, and I combined it with my brake wear-in. So let's get into that a little bit. The brake wear-in, you're going to find in your manufacturer's instructions. Pretty much all of them have them. Some people opt to just drag their brakes all the way to the end of the runway. I opted to actually combine it with a high-speed taxi test. So I got on the runway and pushed up the power and did 3 firm stops. And man, if you haven't done it before, don't skip that step. It is night and day between how much more effective the brakes are after the wear-in. Choosing the airport to do your first flight, you might be restricted. You might have some things that are not ideal. I was lucky in the fact that I had a lot of things that were ideal. I didn't have a tower. I think that is ideal because with a tower, you're potentially spending a lot of time waiting, and you can be a lot more efficient at an untowered airport. I also had 5,200 feet of pavement, which is fantastic. It's, the EAA test manual recommends, I think it's like 4,500 feet or greater. So I was definitely greater than that. So that was ideal. The less than ideal thing is I'm not at a super low elevation here. I'm at 3,400 feet, but it was cold. So density altitude was quite a bit lower and it was high pressure. So those things worked out. It's the things that you can't change, right? If you're stuck at the airport that you're going to be at and it's not ideal, then mitigate it, right? There are things that most likely you can do. Until there's not, then you're going to have to figure out a way to put it on a truck and get it taken somewhere else.
All right, 55, airborne. Oh, he's airborne! Oh my God! Firewall, 2650, looking good. DHT is good. RPM a little high. Coming back. RPM's coming back. Happy. High oil pressure. Not bad though. Alright, 90 knots. Vent traffic experimental 3, Charlie Delta, turn in right, crosswind runway 16. We'll stay over top the field.
Okay, pardon, Safety Steve here. That was my last job in the Air Force, was Chief of Safety, and I earned that in addition to my freak call sign. I was Safety Steve. So let's get into it. Have an abort criteria and stick with them. I say them, right? Not just takeoff, but taxi, CHTs, all phases of flight have abort criteria and stick to it. You can definitely scrub and do a different day. This one's very important, and Mike Patey taught me this best when he was talking about, I don't know if it was Draco or Scrappy, but limit guests and looky-loos. I specifically didn't want certain people there. Why? Because I didn't like them? No, of course not. It was because I know myself, and I would put that pressure on myself to not scrub because they made a big effort to fly out or to be there, and that was a great thing, great honor. Don't have them there. You can recreate it, call it your first flight later on. But having a ground observer with a radio and an off-road vehicle is very confidence inspiring. It's great to have a ground crew, and off-road vehicle, hopefully you don't need it. There's a lot of things that I planned for and had contingencies for and didn't need most of them. But we had them in place, and that inspired confidence. Get in touch with your airfield's crash, fire, and rescue if you're lucky enough to have them on airfield. We don't. But if you do, inform them that you're doing a first flight. Get to know them and bring them a 6-pack of beer or something if that's appropriate, and familiarize them with your aircraft. If they haven't seen this type of aircraft, show them where the handles are, show them where the straps are. It builds good relationships, and they're just as big of airport or airplane nuts as we are. Memorize the boldface and critical emergency checklist items: loss of power on takeoff, engine fire, jammed flight controls, those sorts of things. Something I would recommend that I did was deactivate the autopilot. I essentially just pulled my solid state circuit breaker and deactivated that system. Just didn't want to have any interaction with it. In fact, I didn't even connect the servos to their destination at all. So I didn't have the autopilot. It was in for weight and balance considerations because those servos are pretty heavy, but I didn't have them turned on. If you don't have a carbon monoxide detector, borrow one or get one. Don't take a code to jet. All right. What that means in Air Force is don't take a jet airborne that already has pre-existing squawks. You might think it's minor. Get it fixed. You just don't need anything else on your mind. I'd avoid using secondary flight controls. Don't use flaps. Don't use spoilers. Don't use speed brakes. Don't retract your gear. You can use your trim. You probably should be trimming, of course. I may have mentioned it before. Don't plan on doing stalls your first flight. We talked about how to do a controllability check and pick a minimum airspeed. You're not going to get anywhere near stall speed until you are in ground effect safely above the runway when you're actually touching down a few knots above what you think your estimated flaps up stall speed is. Don't forget that. Obviously, you're going to contingency plan away, but don't over plan. At some point, you just got to go, okay, either this is good enough, we're gonna go ahead and execute, or if the dark thoughts are creeping in, there's no shame in going with a test pilot. Successful first test flight. The bogey has a soul. Woo! You guys, I can't describe how exhilarating and gratifying that day is. So congratulations if you've done it, and good luck to you if you're about to do it. If you're sitting left seat, if you're sitting right seat, if you're sitting back seat, if you're the ground observer and watching a test pilot fly your aircraft, is still, I have to imagine, is so exhilarating. As a reminder, the debrief is over in the long form video. So that concludes this one, guys. I hope this video helps and generates good anecdotes and funny stories in the comments from those who have been through this before, and questions for those who are anticipating or just general av geeks. Next episode, we finally get to fly an actual test run and crunch some numbers and let my inner geek fly. So pedostatic checks, that's next time. Till then, it's Steve, you're clear direct.